Major League Soccer, the latest effort to break the potentially lucrative US soccer market. And, well, at least recently, is doing a pretty good job at it. Interest is growing, attendances are rising, big stars are signing. But have we seen this all before? It's far from the first attempt to bring men's football into the American mainstream. There's been multiple endeavours over the past century to try and bring the beautiful game to the American shores. And most, at times, when it seemed like the US market was right there for the taking, only for them to all collapse under their own weight and fade away into distant memory, like a fart in the wind. It's the events of 1966 and 1967 that perhaps most epitomises the life cycle of football in the United States. All the ingredients were there: a big, fat, juicy, attentive market, a slice of prime US investment, only for it to be served with some out-of-date salad in a Tesco value bun. Before we go into that though, we need to go way back for some context. Contrary to popular belief, football/soccer was actually popular in the United States in the early 20th century, and the origins of the game date back as far as the 1860s. The beautiful game was initially popular in cities with a sizable immigrant population, where the game began to grow most quickly, with organised regional leagues popping up around the country, such as the Bristol County League in 1886, the St. Louis League also in 1886, and the National Association Football League in 1895, which was national only in name, as the vast majority of teams were either from New York or New Jersey. There was an attempt to form a truly national professional league in 1894, when owners of the National League of Professional Baseball Clubs formed the American League of Professional Football. However, that lasted just 17 days. The first proper go at a professional league in the country was attempted in 1921. At the time, many of the teams from the aforementioned National Association Football League were getting a little miffed at the amateur nature of the division, as well as the name. So, with encouragement from the United States Football Association, they merged with the Southern New England Soccer League to form the American Soccer League. Things were going pretty well for the American Soccer League. At its peak, attendances rivaled that of the NFL, and the quality of football on display, as well as high player salaries, attracted a lot of professionals from overseas, particularly the UK. However, this sucking up of footballing talent started to off FIFA, particularly as some of the clubs in the ASL were signing foreign players while ignoring their pre-existing contracts to European sides. This led to FIFA threatening to sanction the USFA, which led to something called the Soccer Wars, which we'll no doubt cover in another episode, sprinkle in a little bit of the Great Depression, and long story short, football in the United States completely imploded on itself. The ASL collapsed in 1933, leaving US soccer a desolate land of minor leagues and constant ridicule from other countries. Football/soccer would lie dormant in the United States for a number of decades, until it was woken by an unlikely source. In the summer of 1966, a little-known tournament was taking place across the pond in England. The World Cup, as it was known, was broadcast to televisions across the United States, presumably because they needed something to break up the same 10-episode reruns of Batman and the Jetsons. Despite this Football World Cup having little to no marketing, it stunned television boffins across the country by being largely popular with audiences. The growing feeling that soccer may be an untapped market in the US of A was compounded following the success of the subsequent World Cup documentary, Goal, in the country. Super-rich investors sensed a sporting gold rush and hastily prepared plans to capitalise on the sport's burgeoning popularity in the United States. Three contenders quickly emerged, with the hopes of forming a truly national top-flight professional league. The first was the National American Professional Soccer League, led by baseball investor Bill Cox and businessman Robert Herman. The second group, the National Soccer League, was fronted by Richard Millen, and the third and final group, known confusingly as the North American Soccer League, led by serial sports franchisor Jack Kent Cooke. Each of the candidates presented their plans to the United States Football Association, which, also confusingly, had been renamed to the United States Soccer Football Association in 1945. The USSFA, which remarkably at the time consisted of just 2 members of staff, would have no doubt been overwhelmed with the amount of attention that they were suddenly receiving. The tiny association had the mammoth responsibility of deciding what the future of US soccer would be, You see, being sanctioned by the USSFA would not only bring credibility from FIFA, but also allow the league to operate within the global transfer system in the quote-unquote proper manner, something that was still a little bit sensitive given what happened 40 years earlier. The USSFA and FIFA knew that 3 sanctioned football leagues launching would destroy any chance that soccer had in the United States. So their initial solution was to ask the 3 prospective leagues to merge into one mega league. However, the reply they got from each of the delegates was a big fat no. So, suddenly realizing that they were dealing with businessmen, decided to talk in terms that they'd understand. In exchange for certification, the USSFA demanded 10% of any television deals, 4% of ticket sales, as well as a flat $25,000 franchise fee from each of the sanctioned league's clubs. Cox, Herman and Millen almost fell off their metaphorical chairs at the figures thrown at them and refused to pay the extortionate fees put forward by the USSFA. Jack Kent Cooke and his North American Soccer League saw the space open up for a tap-in and agreed to the USSFA's demands, and so, on the 19th of November 1966, the NASL was sanctioned as the Premier League of American soccer. To avoid any naming confusion with the other failed bids, the NASL was renamed to the United Soccer Association, which, again annoyingly for the sake of this video, has the acronym USA. The USA, the league, not the country, set about getting to business. Their original plan was to launch their new football league in the spring of 1968, which would give them time to do all the boring admin-y bits of forming a league, such as finding sponsors, getting TV deals in place, agreeing on corner flag designs, that kind of stuff. But it wasn't going to be that easy. The NPSL and NSL weren't dead yet. Shortly after the USA announcement, the 2 rejected leagues got their together, decided that they could play along nicely after all, and merged to form the National Professional Soccer League, or NPSL. Much to everyone's surprise, the NPSL announced that they planned to launch the league the following year, in 1967, and, even more surprisingly, had signed a 2-year television deal with CBS. The USSFA and FIFA were stunned. They'd been completely blindsided by the renegade division and quickly moved to declare the NPSL as an outlaw league. However, the train had already left the station. NPSL was already assembling a 10-team league, throwing money at stadium owners, coaches and players alike in order to get everything ready for kickoff the following spring. The United Soccer Association knew that the tide was turning. Despite being sanctioned, its owners felt that to let the NPSL have a solo run as a division in 1967 would allow it to capture the US soccer market unchallenged. Its organisers scrambled and soon announced that they too would be launching their league in 1967, in an attempt to keep pace with the NPSL. Flash forward to April 1967, and the first of the 2 new major leagues of football in the United States prepared to launch a new dawn for American soccer. The NPSL launched with 10 teams competing to be crowned its inaugural champions: the Atlanta Chiefs, Baltimore Bays, Chicago Spurs, Los Angeles Toros, New York Generals, Oakland Clippers, Philadelphia Spartans, Pittsburgh Phantoms, St. Louis Stars, and Toronto Falcons. Hang on a minute, Toronto, what are you doing sneaking into the US League? Never mind, come on in and take a seat next to the rest of these degenerates. A few things to note about the NPSL. Much like the current MLS, it was split into 2 conferences, the easy-to-remember Eastern and Western Division, which makes sense up until the point you realise that the Toronto Falcons were playing in the Western Division, despite being further east than both the Pittsburgh Phantoms and the Atlanta Chiefs, who played in the Eastern Division. In an interesting scoring quirk, teams were awarded 6 points for a win, 3 points for a draw, and 0 points for a loss. And, even quirkier, in an attempt to encourage attacking football, teams were awarded a bonus point for each goal scored, up to a maximum of 3 per game. This goes a long way to explain how the Oakland Clippers managed to top the Western Conference with a points total of 185. Eat your heart out, Man City. Another fun foible with the NPSL was to do with its television agreement. Less than a month into the new season, referee Peter Rhodes admitted that 11 of the 21 fouls he had called in a previous match were done so to allow CBS to run ad breaks. Peter, not related to Cody, Rhodes, also went on to say that he had forced players to feign injury to serve the same purpose. This makes the NPSL the only league in football history where simulation was actively encouraged by officials. A month later, in May 1967, the second new soccer league would kick off. The United Soccer Association made less drastic changes to footballing traditions. However, that's not to say it wasn't without its own quirks. Realising that they wouldn't have enough time to create teams from scratch like the NPSL, the USA came up with the novel idea of borrowing teams from other countries, selling the league as a kind of pre-season competition to them. So, the 12 teams loaned from around the world were Shamrock Rovers, who became Boston Rovers, Calgary, who became Chicago Mustangs, Stoke City, who became Cleveland Stokers, Dundee United, who became Dallas Tornado, Glentoran, who became Detroit Cougars, Bangor AC, who became Houston Stars, Wolverhampton Wanderers, who became Los Angeles Wolves, CA Shero, who became the New York Skyliners, ADO Den Haag, who became my favourites of the bunch, San Francisco Golden Gate Gales, Hibernian, who became Toronto City, Sunderland, who became Vancouver Royal Canadians, and last but not least, Aberdeen, who became the Washington Whips. So, were the new leagues successful? Well, as you can probably tell from the title of this video, no. Despite both leagues having initially respectable audiences and broadcasting figures, audiences very quickly turned off from American sport's latest playthings. As an example, the opening match for the St. Louis Stars sold 38,000 tickets. However, by the end of the season, the average for the club would be just a fifth of that, with the overall league averaging less than 5,000 fans per match over the season. Why were fans so quick to turn away from the rebirth of soccer in the United States? Well, there's probably a few reasons for that. First and foremost, the quality of football. The standard of football in both leagues was far from good, and for different reasons. The hastily put together squads of the NPSL, despite having some marquee signings, clearly hadn't had enough time to gel and play together before the big kickoff, leaving fans, journalists, and even the CBS commentators to chastise the quality of football being played out in front of them. The USA had a different problem. Few of the players had any interest in giving it 100% for a new competition with little credibility. Teams saw the USA as a pre-season warm-up and played accordingly. Reason number 2, credibility. Admittedly, this is mainly the NPSL at fault for this one. The bonkers point system, as well as questions over broadcasters affecting the sporting integrity of each match, very much hurt the NSPL's integrity as a serious sporting event, which in turn damaged its relationship with existing football fans. To compound this, both leagues failed to present homegrown talent. In fact, there were very few Americans playing at all, which again would have been a turn-off for the patriotic American audience. Reason number 3, oversaturation of football. To put it simply, there was now too much football for the new audience to take. Not only did the unfamiliar American audience have to get their collective heads around, literally, a brand new ballgame, but the two separate league systems were too confusing and too much to handle for the new market. The two leagues were a financial bust. Investors and officials were left scratching their heads as to where it all went wrong. With a year left on their television deal with CBS, the owners of the NPSL decided to have another swing at making soccer great again, but this time by cooperating with their Football League rivals rather than competing with them. In December 1967, the NPSL and the USA merged to create a new 17-team Super League, known as the NASL. Surely the combined power of these two entities would be able to finally crack the American soccer market. Right? Well, not really. After a flop of the first season, in 1968, 10 teams folded and 2 decided to just play friendlies, which meant only 5 teams competed for the 1969 title. The NSAL would go on to have multiple ups and downs before it too folded in 1984, but that's a story for another day. So there you have it. Despite setting the groundwork for having a popular and exciting league system, the USA has failed on multiple occasions to capitalise on its potential success, with the NSPL/USA perhaps being the most notorious example. Which leads me to ask the question, has the MLS finally cracked the code of the US soccer-shaped puzzle, or will it be another false dawn for football in the United States? Well, the men's game anyway. The women seem to have had their together for decades. Thank you very much for watching. Every time I do one of these outros, I'm genuinely astonished by how much support the channel has had and how much it's grown. Now past 25,000 subscribers, which is phenomenal for me. I'm really thankful to everyone who's liked, shared, subscribed, and please continue to do so. If this is your first Root None video, welcome. Hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to watch more. There'll be more on the way that hopefully you'll also enjoy. Check out the back catalogue. And if you're feeling incredibly generous, there is a Buy Me a Coffee link in the description. Thank you again for watching, and hopefully more of the same coming soon.